my plan is, because it's always difficult with these things. There's a couple of people here who've heard me go on about this so many times they're sick of it, and there's a couple of people here who probably haven't know nothing about OpenBrush. So I've got to pitch it somewhere. I'm going to whiz through the slides quickly and give you an overview, and hopefully not get bogged down in detail, and then do as much of the Q&A as possible. And then that, it gives people a chance for me to find out what people are actually interested in knowing more about. So I'll do this bit quickly, or try to. There's basically three main projects, as you can see. Two of them are applications. One's a website, but there's also a bunch of other kind of related libraries and SDKs and smaller projects that hang off of these. Every now and then we get lovely messages from people, and a few months ago someone actually sent us a letter, and I don't know, did anyone send letters anymore? But the reason that I'm doing it is we do get communications from people, artists or educators or kind of just regular users, saying they really appreciate that we're keeping this software running and improving it, and it's the reason I can't not do it. Although, it doesn't pay very well. So that was just really nice to get a letter in the post. We're trying to get this stuff running on as many different bits of hardware and different platforms as possible. Obviously, it's primarily a headset-based thing. So we cover XR on both mobile and desktop, and we're in the Meta Store, Steam, Pico Store, Vive. We're going to be on the Android XR store soon, hopefully. We do have a mode, if you run it on a normal PC or something without a headset, there is a 2D mode that you can use for kind of viewing artworks and exploring them. So we also support kind of just regular Windows, Mac OS. Might have uninstalled it, but it runs on my phone. So we try and make it possible to use it on as broad an array of different devices as possible. Anyone here not heard of OpenBrush? Hands up who has. Piotr? I know you have. I presume the rest of you haven't heard of TiltBrush or OpenBrush? You have. So the concept is broadly spatial painting, I think is probably the best way of saying it. It's not really painting, but it's not really sculpture, and it's very different to traditional 3D design, because it's a lot more freehand and kind of, you basically, something that's unique to VR and you couldn't do in any other medium really, which is just literally move through a space and leave marks behind you. And it can support a really wide array of different styles and looks, and people use it for quite expressive things and quite architectural things and quite cartoony things. The range of styles is always surprising. I mentioned that we also run on, if you haven't got a headset, this is what you see if you run OpenBrush. If you download it and run it on your Mac or your PC and you haven't got a headset, you'll see a not very good UI, but if you pick a sketch, it'll load it up and you can explore it. So we do cater to, obviously, there's so many people that don't have access to VR hardware. We try and make it possible to look around on other devices. And that's something that we want to explore more, because if artists are making stuff, trying to give them more ways of finding an audience means that the software is more valuable to them and everyone benefits. So definitely trying to keep it to sort of focus on that side of things. Let's see, let me just whiz. The other our big rivals, which Bowen knows is one of the dedicated community members. The other spatial painting application that's out there with its own community, quite a distinct community, is Quill. And Quill's interesting it's got different strengths and weaknesses. There's in many ways, Quill's it's more technically advanced. It supports animation. It's deliberately reduced the number of different brushes it's got a very simple set of brushes, whereas OpenBrush has gone in the direction of quite expressive, complicated brushes that all have a very distinctive look. It's less approachable, I think, when you first load it up. It's kind of a bit like, whereas Tilt Brush has always been this kind of warm, inviting, fun, almost toy-like experience. Whereas Quill's just dumps you into this kind of quite stark screen and doesn't give you much help in figuring it out. But the quality of the work done in Quill is astonishing. It just looking at the complexity and the intricacy, and because you can do animations in it, people have basically made short films. Now I'm hoping to gradually support more. The trouble with Quill is it's not being developed anymore, and it's not open source, so it's kind of stuck. And it only runs on PC. So I'm hoping to gradually support more and more aspects of Quill. We can already import Quill, still scenes from Quill and into OpenBrush, and they work fairly flawlessly. The animation's the next big thing, but that's a huge task. So wish me luck on that one. One of the features I'm particularly enjoy is kind of making things extensible and customizable, and one of the things I spent the longest on is a whole plugin system, so you can write simple little scripts in Lua that totally change the way OpenBrush works, and you can change the way the brushes react to your movement, and you can make brushes move automatically. And you could, like, if you see that one down there is pulled in, you can just pull in little avatars from an API on the web and then draw them with brush strokes, and you can do animation. So I spent quite a lot of time making OpenBrush more extensible and more customizable. This is the prototype of the animation that we're working on. That's still pretty experimental. We actually got a volunteer student from Sussex that volunteered and did most of the work on that, but we haven't had time. It's still just sitting there, not quite solid enough to release, but tantalizingly close. So hopefully over the next year, I'll have time to kind of maybe get that polished to the point we can release animation out for people to use. OpenBlocks is much more recently adopted. We were trying to find someone inside Google who would be. The history of OpenBrush was Tilt Brush was a Google product, very popular, won loads of awards. Google decided they were getting out of the VR market. Ironic now, because they're now getting back into it. But they were kind enough to open source it. They also had another application at the time called Blocks that was for kind of low poly modeling. They never open sourced that, and we've spent ages trying to get a contact in Google to kind of see if we could persuade them to release the code for that. We eventually did about a year and a half ago. So we've had a lot less time with OpenBlocks, but now it's another open source, and it ties nicely in together with Tilt Brush. You can make little things in OpenBlocks and then bring them into Tilt Brush and arrange them into bigger scenes. The third part of the project, the thing that binds them together, is the gallery, which is a website for uploading and sharing and showcasing and exploring scenes made in either in Blocks or OpenBrush or in any other 3D program that can export kind of stuff to a sort of common format. But there's a nice workflow where you work in one application, you make something, and then you upload it to the gallery, and then you jump into another application and you can see the stuff you've made, and you can change it or import it or do stuff to it. So we've spent quite a lot of time getting the gallery to work with different applications. So you can see that over on the left, you've got OpenBrush and OpenBlocks, the UI for exploring the gallery. Forgetting which one's which now. There's Godot. Does anyone know Godot, the open source game development? And underneath you've got Unity. Over here you've got Blender. Down here is the editor for what used to be Mozilla Hubs, which is a kind of online shared social VR application. How would you describe hubs, Craig? It's sort of share. It's a 3D
Spaces.
3D virtual spaces for social spaces, but they've got a little editor, and we tie the gallery into that so that you can make stuff in blocks or OpenBrush and then bring it into that. So we've done quite a lot of work to try and get this working with different applications. Vive got in touch about 6 months ago because they've got a platform called Viverse which is a bit like the Icosa gallery. And they asked if we could get OpenBrush to work with it so that people could paint stuff and upload it. And it's actually the same viewer code that runs the Icosa gallery, the same chunk of JavaScript, is used with a few slight tweaks to run the Viverse stuff. But they've layered on top of it, they've got functionality for kind of social and audio and stuff. So it's the rendering tech's the same, but they've got a slightly different kind of feature set. And they had a competition recently, and my lovely little face there as one of the judges. I had to go through every photo I've taken in the last 5 years to find a photo where I didn't look stupid or drunk. And again, there's the API, so any other application can just, we can tie in. Hopefully we'll try and find other people that want to integrate their software with it. The data on Icosa Gallery comes from Google. Had a website they shut down 5 years ago called Google Poly. Anyone remember that? Yes. And a bunch of people who don't like things being shut down saved all the data from it before it disappeared. So it's all stored on the Internet Archive, all the models, 140,000 different pieces of art. So the whole point of the Icosa Gallery was to try and bring all that artwork back in as close to the original form as it could have been. So that was almost a bigger job than writing the website, making sure that all this stuff displayed the way it used to display, and that was a hideously complex task, finding all the weird little edge cases and bits and pieces. I think the key for me, VR obviously VR's failed to become a mass market product, and that doesn't necessarily surprise me. I'm not sure if it was ever going to be a mass market project. But the thing about content creation in VR is it's so obviously suited to putting on a headset. You can do things much more intuitively and easily when you've got a sense of scale and position compared to trying to do 3D stuff on a screen with a mouse. So if VR is going to live on with any application, I think 3D content creation is the most obvious, perfect use of it. And I think it's a good enough application that VR will survive just by that alone, even if it finds no other kind of niches to kind of persist in. So that's why it's about VR. Does that answer your suggestion?